Okay, guys.
Good day and welcome to today's session on precision medicine and the diversity of the genome. To introduce this topic, we must acknowledge the context. And so I want to just start off by saying that we come from a continent that bears the origins of humankind. This in itself, since the emergence of the modern human about 300,000 years ago, has obviously resulted in inherent high genetic diversity and a complex population structure. If one considers environmental adaptations, exposure to unique pathogens, and changes in lifestyle over time, there is a significant increase in genetic variance found in these populations. This leaves a unique potential to discover the genetic and molecular basis of disease from African genetic studies. However, globally, African populations are highly understudied, and precision medicine approaches are based on data from European and Asian ancestry populations. So this limits transferability of findings to the continent of Africa. Today, I have two very renowned speakers who are pioneering the African precision medicine agenda. We're going to start off by introducing Professor Colin Massey Miramwa. He is the founding president and chief executive officer of the African Institute of Biomedical Science and Technology. He is also a distinguished professor of health science at the University of Witwatersrand in South Africa. He co-founded Cradleomics, a precision medicine biotechnology company in South Africa that commercializes research and development products from what is termed ABIST, the African Institute of Biomedical Science and Technology. He is a fellow of the Zimbabwean Academy of Sciences and the African Academy of Sciences. And Colin is a productive scientist with over 100 publications in peer-reviewed journals, 5 book chapters, 1 book in that he has in Google Scholar with the H index of 41. His research is in the application of pharmacokinetics and pharmacogenetics in the discovery, development, and rational use of medicines. He has set up advanced and integrated genomic, bioanalytical, bioinformatics platforms and a phase 1 clinical trial unit, making his institute an outstanding hub for biomedical research in Africa. His topic that he's going to cover right now is on pharmacogenomics in precision medicine and how Africa is making important strides. I hand over to the esteemed Professor Colin Massey Miramwa. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Rizwana, for the very kind introduction. And I'm happy to be in this meeting to discuss with you and fellow scientists in this emerging area of research and potential medical applications. And so today I will be discussing precision medicine, but with a focus on pharmacogenomics, since this is the area I have been doing my research over the past 20 or so years. So I will share the few slides I have, the 3 slides I have, and use those to guide our discussion on some of the key things that could help us chart the way forward. So let me try to share my presentation. Just tell me if you are now able to see the slides. Sometimes when you're on this side, you can. Is one?
Yes, yes, we can. Yes, we can see your slides.
Okay. Let me just play around with the screen here. Good. So, I'm trying to move the slides and for some strange reasons. Okay, good. So I'm going to use this slide to introduce the topic and to just contextualize the relevance of precision medicine, in particular in pharmacogenomics, where we believe that the genetics of an individual has a lot to do with their risk for disease, but also importantly in how they are going to respond to therapies that are used to either prevent or cure a particular disease. So in that regard, we look at where is drug discovery and development happening. And this diagram here shows you that this is mainly happening in developed countries of North America, Europe, and in Asia, with the United States on the lead in terms of new molecular entities that are entering our healthcare market. And you will see that, the other countries in play, are leading in this area: Japan, the UK, Germany, Switzerland, France, and other European countries. And Africa is lumped amongst the, what is called others, where our participation in drug discovery and development is really minimal, and in most places across the continent, non-existent. In fact, it's probably only in South Africa we have one or two companies that have been able to take an idea all the way through to a product on the market. So what it means is that the optimization for safety and efficacy of these medicines are done in people who reside in these different countries I've indicated, which means mainly the Caucasian or people of European ancestry. So the safety of these drugs is optimized for those populations. But when we now look at the global genomic diversity of populations, and I've taken this study we did a couple of years ago, and there have been many other studies demonstrating the same thing I'm going to explain here, is that when you look at genome-wide variation in the populations, you will find that if you take genomes from people of Caucasian ancestry, you will find that they tend to cluster, indicating their sort of homogeneity or similarity to each other. And when you take Asian populations, that is the Chinese, the Japanese, Koreans, and so forth, they also tend to cluster, indicating their closeness in terms of genomic relatedness or homogeneity. When we looked at samples from different African populations, we had collected samples from Nigeria, from the Hausa, the Igbo, and the Yoruba, and we collected samples from Kenya, from the Massey, the Kikuyu, and the Luo, and in Zimbabwe, the Shona, the Ndebele, and in South Africa, the Venda, and in Tanzania. You will see that the African populations, of course, they are located in their own space, indicating their sort of unique cluster as a huge population as compared to the European as well as the Asians. So the first point is that they are distinctly different from the Caucasians and the Orientals in a number of aspects of the genetic structure and the content. But more importantly, again, is that amongst themselves, they demonstrate a huge genomic diversity. So which means that as much as they are politically and geographically identified as a single population, African populations, within it is really many diverse populations which could stand alone by themselves. So, but indeed, the way we work, and even we are conducting this meeting, we are assuming Africa is a homogeneous continent that needs a certain prescribed solution. But it will not work if it comes to this precision medicine because of the huge genomic diversity. So it means that some of the barriers the Caucasians or Europeans have encountered in implementing precision medicine are less compared to what we are going to encounter, because amongst them, if they identify a genetic variant predictive of disease or drug response, they will be able to have a plan which will work for most of the population. But in Africa, if somebody in Zimbabwe or in South Africa finds a genetic variant, it might not be predictive across other populations in Uganda or in Kenya. So generalizability is very poor when it comes to Africa because of the genomic diversity. That's why this session's discussion is around how to handle and deal with this genomic diversity and translating it into medical solutions that can be used across the continent of Africa. So I hope you've now seen this relationship between the drugs not being discovered in Africa, hence optimized for safety and efficacy elsewhere, but they are now introduced in populations that are genomically diverse. Hence, the response of people is likely going to be different. And indeed, when you now look at the VGBase, which is a WHO-sponsored database on reports of adverse drug reactions, one can see that when you look at this database, African populations tend to report more adverse drug reactions to a list of drugs, less, whereas the Caucasians are reporting less side effects for those drugs, which means that probably they have not been properly optimized for the African populations. And we are believing that understanding and going into the genomic diversity of African populations will be able to help us to understand why we are having more adverse drug reactions. And indeed, a number of other drugs, for example, the beta blockers, they tend to work better in people of Caucasian ancestry than they do in people of African ancestry. So the question is, what could be the reason? So this is really the premise of what we are looking at as we say, can Africa be part of this global movement towards precision medicine? So the question therefore is where we are and what it means for where we want to be in 5 to 10 years. And I need to look at it more from an optimistic point of view, that I believe that Africa is the best place to practice precision medicine by the rationale I've just indicated, that we have the most diverse populations. So precision medicine fits us best, even more so compared to the Asian or the European populations, which are more homogeneous, because the solution is not going to be generalizable across Africa. So I believe that Africa should be the home for precision medicine. Indeed, data clearly shows that of the over 1 million sequences or genome sequences available, Africa only has maybe 10, 20,000 of them. So we have less than 1% contribution to the data. But that should not discourage us, because indeed over the past 10 or so years, capacity in Africa has been increasing at a tremendous rate. You know, countries like Nigeria, Kenya, South Africa have really been building capacity for sequencing. And I think in Nigeria, Professor Christian Happy is doing a fantastic job. In South Africa, the South African Medical Research Council has established a platform which is going to enhance our capacity to sequence. So sequencing, we will sequence, and we'll get more data on our diversity. In terms of the knowledge base, in terms of people who have the skill and know-how, indeed, we still do not have enough people across the continent, but a number of efforts through, you know, the African Pharmacogenomics Consortium, people are coming together to build the critical mass. And then in terms of training at master's and PhD level, we are seeing more people with degrees that are focusing on pharmacogenomics. And we recently have a master's degree in genomics and precision medicine. So this is going to head towards that. So we have realized the need, and actions are in place to address it. Infrastructure-wise, in terms of the tools that are required to implement precision medicine, I think the H3 Africa initiative has had a tremendous impact on our, you know, potential to do what we want to do. You know, biobanks have been established in in Northwest Africa, in Central Africa, and Southern Africa, and high-performance computing centers have been established. So the bioinformatics is becoming very strong, in particular through the H3 BioNet initiative. So we now have resources that have led to the establishment of the H3 chip, which we really hope can be used in most of the researches to capture that diversity in Africa in clinical applications. So I feel that as much as our knowledge base is still low, our infrastructure is still low, it is clearly on a positive trajectory in terms of growth. And as you hear later from Kemi, that, you know, the industrialization around it is also emerging. And I think that will also help to speed things up. So I just want to sort of say, where do we want to be in 5 to 10 years? Because Just generating sequences or collecting samples and having a lot of publications and so forth is not enough. It's not going to change the life or health potential of the individual in the hospital or in the community. We want to see all this data we are generating, all these tools we are putting in place translate to solutions for better health treatment outcomes for patients. So I believe that what we want to be able to do in the next 5 to 10 years is to have identified drug-gene interactions that could influence over 100 medicines that are in use. So that information is already there, but we need clinical studies to be done in people of African ancestry. We have recently done a review through H3 Africa Bionet, and we could see that there are so few clinical studies in Africa. And capacity is now increasing. Again, unfortunately, in the same countries like Nigeria, Kenya, and South Africa, Zimbabwe here and there, but a number of parts of Africa are still lagging behind. So we need to increase the capacity for and perform clinical pharmacogenetic studies so that we have the evidence we need to be able to alter the treatment of patients. And then from that kind of research, we should be able to have clinical guidelines on how exactly we are going to implement these genomics guided treatment approaches. And as we are doing that, we need to make sure that our laboratories and clinical infrastructure meet the needs for implementing this precision medicine. Do we have enough laboratories to do the tests? Because right now, most labs, most researchers in Africa ship samples to Europe or America for genetic analysis. We cannot have that when we are trying to implement in the clinic because the turnaround times required are quite tight. And indeed, the IT infrastructure, the electronic patient record systems for the patients, all these things need to be put in place. And I think the same amount of effort and financial deployment which is being put for sequencing should be put also in terms of the clinical infrastructure to enable the implementation of precision medicine. And I want to believe that in 5 to 10 years' time, in South Africa, given the tremendous investment it has made, I think that in 5 years' time, we will have more than 5 hospitals, either tertiary or provincial hospitals, integrating pharmacogenetics in the standard of care. Because South Africa, I think, has made a deliberate investment in terms of the researchers, in terms of the regulatory framework for implementing pharmacogenetics, and it is starting to activate interest in the hospitals. That way, the whole value chain from data generation, curation, storage, development of tools of analyzing the data and interpreting it into clinically, actionable solutions, and then also making sure that there's a regulatory framework which allows it to transition from an academic exercise to a practical and clinical exercise that actually helps patients get better treatment from the various drugs. And indeed, in all these efforts, we need to demonstrate the cost-effective or cost-benefit of introducing pharmacogenetics into the clinical setup, because somebody has to pay for this kind of activity. And I'm sure Kemi will speak to it because she's a leading person who is trying to see how industry can really be part of this journey we are trying to chart. So I will stop there and probably invite sort of questions that can allow us to discuss some of the specific points I have tried to bring across. So back to you, Zwana.
Thank you so much, Colin, for that inspiring presentation. And I will reserve questions for you at the end. We will continue with our second speaker, Ms. Kemi Williams. She is the Vice President of Clinical and Regulatory Affairs at 54Gene. She is a strategic clinical research executive with 20 years combined experience in the medical device and pharmaceutical industries. She has delivered strategic transformation in biotech organizations and created impactful healthcare solutions for patients in advanced and emerging markets. She has a record of success, including building and establishing a clinical and regulatory affairs group from the ground up, launching a new and profitable clinical research business within the biotech organization, and developing teams to design and conduct multiple clinical trials. All these we achieved while driving clinical excellence, operational efficiency, and compliance with regulatory requirements. Today, she's going to be talking to us about public-private partnerships as an engine in driving precision medicine in Africa. She will be discussing the role that private sector in Africa is playing in the evolution of precision medicine on this continent. And her talk will also focus on how they, as 54Gene, are deploying the entrepreneurial energy in the sector to drive precision medicine innovations by Africans, for Africans, and the global population. Thank you, Kemi. You can have the platform.
Thank you so much, Rizwana, for that great intro. I'm really humbled by it. And I want to thank everyone that's part of organizing this convention for the opportunity to contribute to this great discussion we're having. I really believe that Africa is indeed the next frontier in genomic research and precision medicine innovations. So the conversations like the one we're having right now are helping to define the direction of growth for precision medicine in Africa. Thank you. And thank you so much, Colin, for that great intro, because I think it's a nice segue even into my discussion. Now, before I go into how the private sector is contributing to this field, I do really want to acknowledge and applaud the great work that has been done by the public sector and the academia communities in Africa in the field of precision medicines and genomic research. So groups like H3 Africa, leaders like Dr. Charles Rotimi and Professor Kristen Happy, and scores of other notable leaders of African background, they are pioneering giants on whose shoulders the rest of us stand on. Now, as we mentioned, I work at 54Gene. 54Gene is a private company with a mission to deliver on the promise of precision medicine for Africans and the global population. And we want to do this by bridging the disparity gap in genomics data. We really do believe that an investment in the development of precision medicine is critical for growth in this space in Africa. And what we're doing, to talk about the private sector contribution is really bringing in the entrepreneurial energy that is needed to drive innovation in the space. As you know, for most private companies, they are motivated to discover and develop new medical products that will add medical value as well as economic value to the ecosystem. And that motivation in itself serves as an engine of immense growth in the space. Now, if you know the background of private players, there's an important need to be able to recoup the cost of their investments and make the necessary profit to satisfy their investors within a period of time. So that forces the private sector to look at more creative and faster and cost-effective methods to ensure research and development growth in the space. And I believe this need in itself propels precision medicine innovation forward. However, we should not forget the fact that when we take into context, private equity financing in emerging market, there has been focused investment on building infrastructure, such as hospitals, laboratories, research capabilities. Dr. Colin mentioned this earlier on. In so doing, these investments by private sector players have increasingly built the foundation necessary for future growth and expansion in precision medicine R&D on the continent. And I believe that this infrastructural foundation can be leveraged as well by the private or by the public sector, I would say, to advance their genomic research and precision medicine objectives. So in other words, an investment in and by the private sector is an investment for all stakeholders and the public at large in this space. So now that I've given you the context around what I believe the private sector can do to drive innovation in the space, I want to highlight the important, I believe, structure that we need to have in place to be able to achieve these goals. And I would start by mentioning the fact that we know, and I have watched some of the other sessions during this convention, that we know that the field of genomics has the potential to transform our healthcare system in Africa. And based on some of the work that we have already been doing over the last decade, we're developing the knowledge of the interactions between our diverse genetic pool, our very heterogeneous environment as well, and the diseases that afflict Africans. And we are discovering new and interesting genetic variants within our populations that can provide insight on how to bridge some of the global health gaps. However, with all of the investment and discoveries that have taken place in this space in Africa over the past decade, we have very minimal development of new therapeutics, diagnostics, or preventative based on our growing bodies of discoveries. So the problem of discoveries and development leading to full-scale application in terms of medical products are currently being tackled independently by different entities. And this is leading to higher cost and longer time to achieve a precision medicine dream in Africa. What I believe that we need to do is that we need to bridge the gap between early stage discoveries and translational application by leapfrogging, and in that case, we would leapfrog innovations in the precision medicine space in Africa is by establishing partnerships between the private and public sectors in such a way where we can distribute the research and development risks among multiple entities, and in turn, maximize benefits for the individual stakeholders and the public at large. So the questions that may come up is, who are the partners that I'm referring to? Well, I'm talking about the industry, private sector like 54 gene players, academia, and the government in Africa. Each of these different entities have independent knowledge, tools, and biological samples that they could actually galvanize collaboratively together to speed up the development of new drugs, diagnostics, and preventative measures for Africans and in fact, the global population. And one of the ways to do that is to be willing to get together so that these problems that we're mentioning, ability to go from discovery to translation and application can be solved jointly, saving us a great deal of time and money. I think some of the questions that may come up from this would be, well, what is in it for each of the group? Well, I would say let's start by what is in it for the global African population, for the African population in itself. And I would say for the African people, having faster access and hopefully less costly access to new innovations, targeted therapies and diagnostics is definitely a huge benefit. But then if I go into each of these groups, talking about the government, right? What is the government? What does the government stand to gain from such a public-private partnership? I believe the government and the associated regulatory agencies can use the information derived from these partnerships to create and streamline standards and policies for how precision medicine is developed and commercialized within the continent. And in so doing, ensure that their citizens' welfare and rights are fully protected in the process. Innovative precision medicine drugs and tests require regulatory approval that would validate and provide vetted support for the efficacy, safety, and in fact, relative economic value of those innovations. The hope is that by being part of such a partnership, the knowledge that the government gains can help country governments define review processes that would ensure that high quality, safe, and accessible discoveries enter the market. What about the private sector? The biotechnology or biopharma companies, what do they stand to gain? Well, I believe that they could use the knowledge and the immense resources from these collaborations to rapidly advance through their research and development life cycles. Let's take an example. If most biotechnology companies in the space have access to more diverse, more robust, and a higher number of biological samples from such partnerships. This can lead to faster identification of biomarkers, which can then be used to investigate new drug targets, biological pathways, and disease mechanisms to lead to more efficient drug discovery and development. And, we talked about, this group of players needing, to recoup the cost of investment. What this allows them to do so in a faster and less costly innovation cycle pathways. Now let's talk about the academia. And when I'm talking academia, I'm thinking of universities and academic health systems. Through this partnership, they could have access to larger set of data, more funding, and new hypotheses that can drive new discoveries and new educational opportunities within the space. And so I really think that it is really critical that we are looking at ways to develop more public-private partnership in the space of precision medicine as a way to drive more innovation in Africa. There are questions and concerns around, how do you manage an issue of intellectual properties and funding, right? We know that intellectual property protections in other parts of the world have been major drivers of innovation and competition. And so we know that for this type of partnerships to be successful, the proposed collaborations should have IP policies that are designed and enforced to incentivize precision medicine innovation for these researchers. And we do that by making sure that the knowledge-intensive industries and players that we're talking about are given the temporary economic incentives to own exclusive rights to the commercializations of their discoveries. But let's go beyond that. There's the benefit sharing aspect as well. The goal will be that we allow that we ensure that every player that is contributing to this innovative partnership also stands to benefit. So we should look at how we are sharing benefit across the participants, the patients that are contributing their samples and their data, how we're sharing benefit across the governments that are allowing for this partnership and approving these products, and sharing benefit also with the academia and biotechnology organizations as a way of driving more of these innovations. I also want to touch on one element that I think is quite important, and that is funding. We know that funding is very critical for R&D in any space. And I think for such collaborations to be successful, we should look at sharing funding responsibilities among all parties. So the government, the industry, the academia players should be willing to commit certain budgets towards these partnerships over a sustained period of time. So for now, I would like to stop there as to the importance of using a public-private partnership to drive innovations in precision medicine. But I welcome any questions you may have on some of the materials that I've shared with you.
Thank you so much, Kemi, for such an insightful discussion there on unpacking. I think there's a lot of pertinent points that you actually focused on, and we can basically unpack here. We do have some time to start with some questions and answers, and so I would like to start off by also addressing Colin, who touched on the baseline from the basic applied research perspective, the readiness in terms of personalized medicine in the continent. And the first question I'd like to pose would be, does Africa, South Africa, East Africa, North Africa have the appropriate skilled human resource and infrastructure for precision medicine research? And I think you kind of answered yes, but obviously we know that the fabric of this is different across the continent, because the continent is not one country, it's a huge continent. So I'd like to ask, what are the paths from laboratory to patient care for precision medicine in Africa? Colin.
Thank you very much, Rizwan. And also thank you, Kemi, for the nice presentation. It's really nice to hear about all these private-public sector partnerships. So I think that in terms of readiness, we probably need to focus on the training of medical doctors and pharmacists. As it stands, if you go through their training programs at universities, they rarely touch on any aspect of precision medicine. And of course, in particular, we have looked at their knowledge base in terms of pharmacogenomics. There is virtually very little. So as much as we might come up with nice biomarkers for disease risk, nice biomarkers or algorithms for treatment adjustments, if we do not educate our doctors and pharmacists on what this means and how to apply it. So I believe that we need to work a lot on having the buy-in of medical practitioners and the pharmacists, of course, and create ICT tools that will enable them to read and interpret the information. Because right now, as it stands, the information sometimes is too complex for the medical practitioners to interpret in a timely manner in the short time they have with the patient. So we want user-friendly clinical decision support systems that need to be put in place. And in terms of the hospitals, it will take very long before we have proper electronic medical record systems. So in the meantime, we can use a lot of other digital solutions that do not require you to have a very complicated electronic system at the hospital. And I think that a lot of apps can be made that can enable this communication. So I believe that as part of defining this pathway, the doctors who are the end users really are in dire need of empowerment in terms of knowledge and tools that will enable the delivery. And if we move backwards, it's the link with the laboratories. I think that I think the labs, at least in South Africa, we have, if you look around, they are very good labs that could easily adopt this type of methodologies. But if you go across Africa, like you have said, Nigeria, like Kemi has just talked about, the coming in of Illumina really has changed the game. So really, this means that Nigeria would have enormous capacity to be able to support any such kind of laboratory work. So that, I feel other countries in Africa are okay. They could provide services for those who are still quite below the sort of required level. In terms of researchers, I think we really still have quite few researchers, because I would talk about, say, Zimbabwe. We have probably 20 universities, and there are probably only 2 universities that are doing anything in that area. So Nigeria, I'm not sure about the figures, but I'm so sure that relative to the whole country, there are still quite few. So I still think that this needs to be done. So really, I've just described these parts because these are the units that describe the pathway to this precision medicine. In terms of making biobanks, South Africa has done very well with a number of biobanks, operational, well maintained. Uganda has done very well. Nigeria has done well. I think Ghana is also coming up. So you can see in a continent with 54 countries, it's difficult for us to sit here and come up with a solution for Africa. We have to come up with a solution for some of the countries, and then we build the case for the others. So I believe that if I were to make a very sort of general statement, is that countries which are probably quite ready are South Africa, Nigeria, Kenya, Ghana, Uganda, and other countries like Zimbabwe have a bit of effort, but out of 54 countries, therefore, you see, we cannot make general statements. So that would be my answer. That is across the board, we are almost as diverse in terms of our readiness as our genomes. So you can take it the way you think, but I think that's how I see it. But I think having champions is good, because Nigeria will then motivate and inspire West Africa. Kenya, Uganda will inspire Central Eastern Africa. South Africa will inspire Southern Africa. That's how I look at the continental model.
True. That's such an insightful way of putting it. You know, and as you've been working in this field for so long, you know, what has been the appetite by multinational pharmaceutical companies in creating more relevant medicines for the African population? Because I think for some time we've realized that Africans are registering far more adverse drug reactions compared to other population groups. And it would be interesting if you know. I mean, you could answer if you know. Sorry.
No, I know because I've been knocking on their doors forever. I've been trying to sell this case that, you know, if Africa is part of the market for their medicines, they are surely interested in how safe and efficacious the medicines are going to be on the continent. Now, the thing which then sometimes strikes you very quickly is how small a market Africa is. You know, I could have shown you a diagram that we are really almost an insignificant market for these big pharmaceutical companies. They don't think of us when they are thinking, where are we going to make profits? So that I realized by actually interacting with these different companies that we have to look at it differently. Most of the drugs we have are generic drugs coming through India, China, Brazil. These are the kind of drugs we have. So we need a different strategy, I think, to convince the pharmaceutical industry that there is something for them. We need to show them that working in Africa with our genomic diversity, that is our selling point. That the science that comes from working in Africa is so important for global science that it will help them find new medicines for cancer. It will help them find better ways for personalizing medicine. Because until we are a good market, the marketing approach does not sell, but the convincing them that working in Africa with Africans, they have a better chance to solving problems like cancer treatment, cancer targets and validation and so forth. And I think that that is the angle we should do. But nevertheless, on a truly scientific point of view, most scientists in industry are very interested with working with scientists in Africa. I know a number of pharmaceutical companies now that have worked collaboratively with us, with researchers in Ethiopia, with researchers in all these different countries. They've created capacity for clinical trials. I think in the past 10 years, pharmaceutical companies helped the establishment of about 8 phase 1 clinical trial units across Africa. So I think that tells you that, you know, they also, from a science point of view, they feel that it is worthwhile to be part of us. And if you look at biotech companies, I think we've just mentioned Illumina. Without mentioning names, there are many other biotech companies that are working in partnership to try to see how they can have a local presence. Because I think they are also aware that in 10 to 15 years' time, Africa is slowly becoming very strong in terms of its economies. So we will be a good market in the next 5, 10 years. I have to be optimistic because I'm here. I believe that we will be a market that no one can ignore. And as such, pharmaceutical companies are trying to be also part of the solution so that when that opportunity arises, they are better poised for their products. So I think there's a very good room, and we should work towards managing that and motivating for it in a manner that is a win-win, not a skewed approach where we don't know what we are getting from the partnership, but the other people know what exactly they want. We need to know what we want from the partnerships, and I think that Kemias will probably have a better and more ways to say around it. But I believe there is good interest in the pharmaceutical biotech industry, and we just need to manage that in a manner that makes us move fast.
So I would like to stop there and say, you know, this is a very, very pertinent discussion in the sense that we understand Africa has a huge disease burden. but still we're not seen as the sort of primary market for these drugs. And therefore we have to build that economic case. And I suppose it goes back to the fact that most of our countries are not, they're not as wealthy as the northern countries. And this is where we see that that gap between, you know, the first world and the sort of developing world. And I suppose I think things are changing now. And like you're saying, we're becoming more stronger economically as a continent. Most countries are asserting their economic independence, and we're seeing a lot of investment coming through in research and innovation in this space. With that, I'd like to just ask, you know, Kemi, if you could sort of comment on what the role can be for the private sector to play in the genomic research and precision medicine field. You spoke about, you know, partnerships and fostering those partnerships, and that's such a pertinent message that you gave. You know, can you just elaborate a little bit? You know, what are your thoughts on this private-public partnership mechanism as a tool for advancing the field? And how do we permeate the thought leadership in this field, especially when it comes to convincing governments? And since you've been placed in that position where you had to do that, you know, maybe you could advise.
Thank you, Rizwana. And actually, your last question to Colin is a nice transition into this other question as well, because I wanted to add on to the fact that yes, while we would agree that Africa doesn't have the purchasing power that most of our Western continents have, we do have the populations, right? And we do have the discovery opportunities for many biotechnology companies looking for new type of targets and molecules. Our populations are still considered relatively treatment naive. So if you're looking for new insights, you want to go into that group, either to discover new type of variants or to validate new molecules. So the way I always say it in terms of, you know, what we're bringing to the table, yes, while we might not be able to bring in the economic power that many of these companies might be looking to as way of selling their products and recouping on cost, we are bringing the advancement, faster advancement in the innovation pipeline because we have the population that can drive that. And I think that that's one of the ways that the private sector has been helping to galvanize precision medicine growth in Africa. In our engagement with other biopharma partners, we're speaking about the insight that is still embedded within these populations that they would not be able to find easily elsewhere. And when you talk about, you know, if you come to Africa, right, we're moving away now from the years of parachute research, right? Now, when you're coming back and saying you're coming to Africa to get insight, to discover new molecules, to move your product faster through the pipeline, because we know that when it comes to personalized healthcare and precision medicine, targeted therapies actually get to go through the life cycle of innovation and commercialization faster than non-targeted therapy. What we're contributing to them in time also means that they come back and reinvest in Africa and make those drugs available. So what maybe we are not able to pay for right now in terms of purchasing power, we're already investing by allowing access to innovate with us. So I think we should continue to speak about that. And I would say that the private sector right now, and in some of our work within 54 Gene, we continue to highlight this great opportunity that we have within our people. Now, I want to agree definitely with Colin. I'm also optimistic on the economic front. The more we're investing in infrastructure, right, the more we're having conversation about developing our talent pool so that we have the resources within our continent to drive innovation, the more there is an opportunity for us to actually grow economically. And in fact, you know, when I talk about partnership, I'm always thinking also about the role that the government plays in this aspect as well. You know, what kind of policies are we putting in place to drive innovations? Because once the government starts seeing medicine, biomedical medicine, genomic research precision medicine as a tool for growing the GDP, right? Then we are investing in it the way we are investing, I think, in tourism or entertainment or oil, depending on the country you're speaking about. And I honestly think that our government should be helping to develop the economic power of the people on this continent by seeing health and technology as a growth opportunity for the economy. And what does that mean? If we do that, we get the economic power also to be an attractive location for many of these global biotechnology companies to want to sell their products, because now they know we can afford to pay for this product. So those are the two key areas that I really think we should be highlighting. And those are the two key areas I would say that the private sector is highlighting in our engagement with other biotechnology and pharmaceutical partners to drive precision medicine is to the and the potential resources we hope to have in our economy in the future.
Thank you, Kelly, for that. That's quite a lot to think about as well. I want to ask you another question, which I don't know if you're going to be able to also answer this, but it is something that I'm wondering about. You spoke about investment, and you spoke about, envisage a sort of return on investment in this space. And I don't know, but being in the private sector, you've obviously attracted funding, and maybe you could give us some insight on sort of, how do you get investors to actually get the envisaged return on investment in this space? What is the selling point?
Let me see. That's an interesting question, Rizwan.
You touched on it in your discussion.
Well, I can tell you that at 54 Gene, we are open to having conversations with many stakeholders, right? And I think that one of the things that we are committed to doing, like I said earlier, is closing this gap in genomic data, right? Genomic research data. And by coming to the table as willing, capable, well-educated partners, we are able to have very positive conversations with people who want to engage in this space in Africa. So we are developing talents. We are contributing very much to investment in capacity within the continent. We are ensuring that we have open conversations with internal players as well within the continent across the different countries that we have presence in. And in so doing, we remain an attractive organization for people who want to drive growth in that space.
So to sum, what you're saying is that there is a shared mindset here in terms of the investor and the science that they're investing in. And that shared benefit of the ultimate outputs are sort of what is attracting people into 54 Gene, and sort of the envisaged return on investment would be the sheer output in terms of the science and the capacity being developed.
Yeah, so what I'm saying is that we are definitely committed to our mission of delivering on precision medicine for Africans and as well the global population, so that some of the insight that we derive in our work will be beneficial not only to Africa, but also to non-Africans. And in our commitment to that mission, in our investment in being able to achieve that mission, we're able to attract the right partners that can help us achieve our goals.
Okay. I think now I'd like to ask the question around, and I think this is a very hot topic in this area. And, there's this talk about genetic sovereignty and exploitation of genetic data. And, how do we manage that? Because obviously this field entails sharing information, sharing personal genetic information in order to, in order to increase the knowledge in the area of pharmacogenomics, and disease, especially. So How do we manage that? Because there are laws that are coming up that some people feel may hinder progress in this field, etc. How would we manage that? Just some of your thoughts broadly.
Rizwana?
Yes, it's either Colin or yourself that could take the question.
Well, I can have a go a bit on aspects of it. Is that, when the whole human genome was sequenced, it was seen as a public good. And as people started to sequence, funded by different public funds, people deposited information in different databases. It was fine as far as things went like that. But at the point where we started to see the potential benefits commercially, as we were also going into the clinic, issues for confidentiality in terms of commercial exploitation, sharing of benefits and so forth have become important. So whilst I'm not exactly able to comment on whatever the current situation is good or bad, but that we are talking about it is very important, because along the way, the information is moving faster than maybe even our social ethical development. The technology is moving ahead of us. So we are having to try to deal with something which is potentially going out of control. So we sometimes end up with draconian regulations simply because we don't understand what we are faced with. But I believe that in whatever way we are, we'll end up with a moderate position where we are asking ourselves, with the players, the private sector players, with the solutions coming into the industry towards better healthcare. How do we ensure that we share it sort of not equitably, but in a fair manner, that people who donate their DNA for all these innovations and discoveries are later on not able to afford the medicines or the diagnostic tests that arise thereof. How do we manage that? Countries which probably contribute to clinical trials, and all this is done, and when the drug comes out, they have no capacity even to buy those medicines. So I think it is, for me, I like the idea that it's being discussed, but I don't have a clear opinion on whether it is good, what has been arrived at, the different laws are good or bad, because I remember many years ago, we did studies in Nigeria. There was no ethical framework to do collection of DNA and moving around with it. But once we did that, people realized that, there needs to be regulation around this. Then they started putting regulation into it. The same thing now, we have realized that all these genomes lead to a lot of products which are commercially useful, but they can also compromise the privacy of individuals. And now bioinformatic tools have developed in such a way that even if you think you are anonymously sort of taken on board, some people who are determined to find who you are, they will find you. So we are trying to balance these things. So I believe that discussion should, and it has started. As to where it will end, I believe that it will follow the normal course of debate and discourse, and will arrive at a good point. But I think it's good we've started talking about it.
Yes. Okay. And I want to add to that it's really important that we have a regulatory framework around how we move in this space. We want to make sure that patients' welfares and rights are protected, but we also want to continue to drive innovation. And I think that definitely conversations need to continue to occur amongst all players to make sure that we are achieving the goals. I will take US as an example. The FDA is always collaborating with the academia sector as well as the industry sector to be able to put in the right guidelines and guidances on the research and development, or to modify them appropriately over time as they gather new bodies of knowledge. And I think within Africa as well, we should continue to have that conversation across all the multiple stakeholders to ensure that we're putting the right regulations in place to protect the people that are really contributing to this effort.
Thank you so much, both Colin and Kemi. It's been wonderful having this session with you. We appreciate your inputs and insights and the thoughts from your leadership capacities in your own area to help us to understand and unpack this very hot topic, very well defined in terms of where we're going and placing that African context behind it. I thank you very much.
Many thanks for this opportunity as well.